This day in sports history. This episode is brought to you by the Sterling Soap Company. How often do you think about your soap? Well, if you answered, not much, maybe you should. You see, a lot of what passes for soap in stores is technically not soap, according to the FDA's definition. It's full of lab-created chemicals and detergents because it's cheaper to make. Now, what if you could buy natural soap made from natural ingredients like tallow, palm oil, coconut oil, and scented with essential oils, and for just a little bit more than you'd pay for grocery store soap? Sterling Soap is 100% natural, and with a wide variety of bath soaps, shave soaps, beard balm, lotions, and cologne, there's a product and a scent for just about everybody. Check them out for yourself at sterlingsoap.com. That's STIRLING soap.com. It's February 14th, and on this day in 1986, Larry Bird played a game that rests somewhere between truth and myth. This was Larry's famous left-handed game, in which he said he was going to shoot with his weaker left hand to save his dominant right hand for the LA Lakers, who were up next on the schedule. It was Larry being Larry, and Larry having some fun midway through the regular season grind. The Boston Celtics were on the road at Portland on this night. The Blazers were a middle-of-the-pack team on a 4-game losing streak. The Celtics were the best team in the East and winners of 14 of their last 15 games. They were also in the middle of a 7-game West Coast swing, with the Lakers and the Suns coming up in the days following this one. And yeah, he did start off the game shooting with his left hand.
Paratrooper caught for Kersey, 2 points for Bird.
That was a great shot.
I mean, made it look easy. He shot that with the left hand, floating underhander, and made it look simple.
But the myth of this game, and it was perpetuated by Bill Walton in the years after he retired, is that Bird played the entire game shooting with his left. Instead, 10 of his 34 shots he took on this night were with his left hand, which is still pretty special, especially since he made most of those. Of course, with the game on the line in overtime, he took the final shot with his right.
Game clock, top of your screen. Larry Bird with 3 seconds left. Timeout for Portland. 47 points for Larry Bird.
And that does put a little pressure.
Bird scored 47, grabbed 14 rebounds, and handed out 11 assists in a 120-119 win for the Celtics.
Some night it goes in, some night it don't. That night it happened to work out. But if I remember correctly, we won that game in overtime by like 1 point. So, I probably shot with my right hand the whole game.
2 nights later, Boston was in LA, and Bird's well-rested right hand scored 22 in a win over the Lakers. On this day in 1988, Eddie the Eagle took flight. Sorta. We all love underdog stories, right? Now, while those stories typically are about overcoming odds and winning, well, this one doesn't finish with such a triumph. Far from it. But it is an underdog story, and one we can all appreciate on some level. His name was Michael Edwards, and his friends called him Eddie. And on this day, he competed in the Normal Hill ski jumping event at the 1988 Calgary Olympic Games. He was the first to ever represent Great Britain in ski jumping. As a teenager, Eddie fell in love with skiing, and he dreamed of being a downhill ski racer, but that didn't work out very well.
It was just there. I was in Lake Placid. I was racing for Britain in alpine racing, doing slalom, GS and downhill. Ran out of money and I was looking for something cheaper to do, and I saw the ski jumps and realised that we've never had a jumper before. And I thought, I'll have a go at that. And I started on the small jumps, worked my way up to the big ones very quickly. Managed to qualify for the Calgary Olympics and then went and jumped. And it was fantastic. And I've always liked to dare myself to do things. And ski jumping was one of those things I thought, I dare myself to do it. And I did it and it was great.
He had a few things going against him, besides the obvious. One, he was completely self-funded. Britain had no infrastructure for Olympic ski jumping and had no interest in supporting one. Still, Eddie found a way to stay in Lake Placid and train. Secondly, ski jumpers were typically much lighter. By the time he showed up in Calgary to compete, he was at least 20 pounds heavier than any of the other competitors. And his eyesight was not great, forcing him to wear thick glasses to correct his vision. And of course, glasses fog up when you put goggles over them, and that's kind of a detriment when you're flying down a ski jump ramp and looking for a place to land after you launch. But despite all of those limitations, Eddie pushed on, training with Chuck Berghorn, John Viscom, and Jay Rand. Eddie's journey to the Calgary Olympics started in earnest 2 years prior, with Eddie showing up on Berghorn's doorstep saying he wanted to train for the Olympics. Eddie's journey to the Calgary Olympics started in earnest 2 years prior, with Eddie showing up on Berghorn's doorstep saying he wanted to train for the Olympics. Years later, when he reflected on that moment, Berghorn said that he couldn't quite believe what he was seeing. The guy was old, had never jumped before, was wearing the thickest glasses he'd ever seen, and he was chunky. He didn't have any equipment, so Berghorn gave him a helmet that didn't even have a strap, and ski boots that were so big, Eddie had to wear 5 pairs of socks just to make them fit. Berghorn had a hard time taking Eddie seriously, adding that there was not a day that went by where he thought Eddie could actually make it to the Olympics. He didn't have an ounce of skill and was mostly untrainable, according to Berghorn, who himself was not really a professional ski jumping instructor. Berghorn groomed and maintained the hills at Lake Placid, training jumpers as a side hustle. Viscom was a former Olympic ski jumper, and Rand had been an Olympic skier. They both volunteered their time to help Eddie go from a disastrous agony of defeat moment to a confident jumper. Eddie also qualified for the Olympics through a loophole, which at the time said if you were the only representative from your country in your sport, you could compete whether you were good or not. So on this day, Eddie became Eddie the Eagle. He skied down the normal hill twice, took flight for 2.25 seconds each time, landed on 2 skis for a distance of 55 meters each time, and finished last. His combined score for the 2 jumps on this day was 69.2. The next closest competitor had 140.4 points. The gold medalist was Finland's Matti Nikkanen, who had a total of 229 points. But everybody remembered the last place finisher that day for the everyman courage and chutzpah to pursue the dream and compete on the highest level.
Well, it was a dream for me to get to those Olympic Games, and I made my dream come true by getting there, and it was a fantastic experience. It was very nerve-wracking, jumping in front of 89,000 people in Calgary and in front of the billions of people around the world on television. But being christened Eddie the Eagle, they really took me to their hearts, and they really appreciated my efforts at the Calgary Olympics, and to the extent where I'm still busy 25 years later. So it was really, really nice. I loved it. I can remember it like it was yesterday. It was absolutely fantastic, and if I could do it all over again, I would do exactly the same.
But while Eddie's story inspired a lot of people, the Olympic folks were not enamored with his story, and they worked quickly to close that loophole that Eddie had exploited. After the Calgary Games, the Olympic Committee changed the rules for qualification, saying that you had to have competed in international events and been placed in the top 30% or top 50 competitors. That rule effectively barred anybody else following the path that Eddie took to take flight on this day in 1988. On this same day, 2,700 miles away in Daytona, Florida, the Daytona 500 came down to a father-son duel with Bobby Allison holding off his son Davey to take the checkered flag. But this race is known more for what happened on lap 104. Richard Petty was bumped from behind by Phil Barkdahl. He spun and then he barrel rolled 8 times against the front stretch catch fence. The CBS race coverage was in commercial break when the wreck started, but they broke back in with Petty's car cartwheeling down the tri-oval.
Bad trouble, bad trouble.
Okay, a terrible crash. Richard Petty's car has turned over 7 or 8 times coming off turn 4 and was just struck by another car. It's one of the most violent accidents we've ever seen at the Daytona International Speedway here as leader Darrell Waltrip squeezes through. Petty's car nosed into the wall and then went sideways and barreled end over end and then side over side time after time. A terrible accident involving the man who has won this race 7 times over the years.
Petty survived the horrifying crash with a broken right ankle as his only injury. This was the first Daytona 500 where restrictor plates were used in an attempt to slow the cars down. But those restrictor plates also created tightly packed racing that many believe led to the horrific accident. Things settled down in the race after that and led to a memorable finish.
He's got less than half a lap to do.
And they have enough lead. I believe this is going to be a battle between the father and son. I don't think anybody
Davey.
else can try it, but here he comes. He's going to
To
do
the
it.
bottom. He's down low. Bobby Allison high. Davey Allison trying the inside move. Bobby Allison holds him off. They come to the stripe. And the winner of the 30th annual Great American Race, Bobby Allison. Davey Allison, his son, in second. Judy Allison ecstatic. What a tremendous family performance.
A 1-2 father-son finish was a special day for the Allison family. It was Bobby Allison's 3rd Daytona 500 win and was also his last Winston Cup win of his career. Hey, I needed to call a quick timeout to let you know that we're giving away a $50 gift card to Homefield Apparel. Have a favorite college sports team? Of course you do. You're listening to a sports podcast. Well, Homefield Apparel has all the great gear so you can support your team in style. Jerseys, hoodies, hats, and a whole lot more are available in your team's colors and insignias. So go to sportshistorynetwork.com/giveaways for your chance at a $50 gift card to Homefield Apparel. I've also put a link in the show notes. Now, let's get back out there. We've got more of this episode to do. In 1975, the San Diego Conquistadors beat the New Jersey Nets 176-166 in quadruple overtime. It was the highest scoring game in ABA history, with Dr. J. Julius Erving scoring 63 in the loss for the Nets. And in 1990, Michael Jordan wore number 12 for the only time in his professional basketball career.
6'6" for North Carolina, number 12, Michael Jordan.
His Chicago Bulls were in Orlando to play the Magic. Before the game, someone went into the Bulls locker room and swiped Jordan's number 23 jersey. No spare 23 was available, so Sam Vincent lent him his number 12 practice jersey, which did not have a name on the back of it. Jordan scored 49. But Orlando won the game in OT, 135-129. And time now for today's That's Got Nothing to Do with Sports fun fact. You've seen those recipes on the back of boxes of brown sugar or on cans of soup, right? Well, the first recipe to appear on the back of a Campbell's soup can was in 1960, when a recipe for tomato soup cake was printed on the label. Tomato soup cake originated around the 1920s and grew in popularity as wartime restrictions and later the Great Depression caused a shortage or an escalated price of produce, such as tomatoes. So, folks improvised with cheaper versions. This has been an original Thrive Suite production.